Hello, I'm Phil Elms for the Urban Rehabber Program. Why is it some folks seem to have some sort of magic touch when it comes to real estate investing? Well, maybe the best answer is they've found the sweet spot, that place where the real profits are made, time after time. Today, we will take a look at a couple of projects, run some numbers, and we'll take a look at, shall we call it a new old or little known business model that will save you money, especially income taxes, save you management headaches, and if you wish, give your tenants a real shot at home ownership, while all the while maximizing your real estate profits. That's a big order. Let's see how it works. Indeed, in tennis, squash, racquetball, baseball, a given swing will result in a more powerful hit if the ball strikes the racket, bat, or club in the latter's sweet spot. Much science and study goes into finding the sweet spot on a baseball bat. When it comes to real estate investing, your sweet spot is that area where risk and opportunity are in balance. Not just in balance, but that place where your effort will make the greatest impact. Managing risk. If there's going to be a sweet spot at all, that sweet spot has got to be somewhere related to and close to the matter of managing risk. We manage risk in four important ways. First of all, we find extraordinary value. We leverage our capital using OPM. We maximize our resources. And finally, we have a built-in Plan B. One way we find and stay in our sweet spot is by managing risk. What is extraordinary value? Well, that's the need to know how to find projects with the greatest upside potential, maybe where there is also less competition. In real estate, we can use leverage. How does that help us? Well, we conserve our own capital by using that of others. OPM, other people's money. As far as maximizing resources, we accomplish that when we astutely, or accurately, shall we say, bring our skills, our judgment, and our networks into the effort. And finally, we don't neglect our Plan B. When it comes to picking the right opportunity, well, it's important to understand the market, understand market cycles, go for distressed housing or distressed real estate. That works in any market, up or down, for all time. Finding a project in the right neighborhood certainly still counts. There are neighborhoods that, because of loss of employment, factory shutdowns, and so forth, are simply going down, while meanwhile other neighborhoods are deemed more or become over time more desirable. The near north side of Chicago, West Loop, for example, are cases in point. Picking the right opportunity, as far as I'm concerned, also means don't be a pioneer in your projects. Stick to the standard 3 to 4 bedroom, 1.5 to 2 bath home. That's been a standard for generations, and it will be a standard for generations to come. And finally, consider affordable housing. That is the opportunity. Well, why affordable housing? Well, first of all, demand exists at every price point. Affordable housing isn't just low-priced housing. Well, I'll explain that. Affordability means housing priced at 30% of the area median income. For example, if in a neighborhood, and you get this information from the census for that, if nothing else, median household income of $60,000 a year, take that as an example. That household, their costs for housing should not exceed $18,000. That's 30% of 60,000. What does that mean? Well, it means $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month buys a $150,000 house in today's market, just figuring financing through FHA. The same thing would hold true for a rental. So we're talking about $1,500 a month in housing expense, whether you're buying or renting. So in terms of affordable housing, by definition, in that neighborhood, anything over $150,000 exceeds affordability for half of the neighborhood households. Of course, in every neighborhood, there are houses that are better and more costly and houses that perhaps need some work. Basically, we accomplish our goals. Your sweet spot is affordable housing going right down the middle. So there's a sweet spot in project budgeting too. Investor or builder rehabber, we want our total costs, and here's a rule of thumb for you, to equal no more than 65 to 75% of after repaired value, so-called ARV. Okay, so here's a little diagram that kind of illustrates that. Consider this a good shorthand or rule of thumb way to figure out how much you can afford to pay for a project house. We teach this in all of our classes. At the stated or negotiating purchase price, the question is, can the property be rehabbed, covering both hard and soft costs, for 75% or less than the expected ARV? Meet that test, and that project should be good to go. If costs in the end go higher, well, you always have the option to rent the home as an investor and wait for the market to take you out, if you will. For some, becoming a landlord with that house is your plan B. Let's take a look at a couple of examples. Here's Project 1. It's on Chicago's South St. Lawrence Avenue. It's a 3-bedroom, 1.5 bath brick row house. Well, it's not 1.5 baths right now, but after rehab it will be. But this row house, built certainly before the turn of the 20th century, needs everything. It needs a roof and front parapet work, 100% drywall top to bottom, new baths, which means new bathroom fixtures, that additional half bath I was talking about. Maybe you can find a place to squeeze in a 3/4 bath under a shower instead of a tub. It's going to need all new electrical. The service is okay coming into the building. As you're finishing the place up, it's going to need floors, generally hardwood, certainly on the main floor, and then vinyl or carpeting in the kitchen, on the bedroom level, and so forth. Miscellaneous carpentry. You're going to have new doors, every room, every closet, full new kitchen, cabinets and appliances, replacement windows. Well, there are a couple of good ones in there, figure not all. The estimated budget to bring this house right up to standard, to today's standard, as a rental or for a first-time home buyer would be $35,000 to $40,000. Here's some inside pictures of that house. You can see that it's got a hot water boiler, or steam. That's a good thing. But as it happens, by the time you get to that house, that's gone. So you're going to need a new heating system. Inside, the walls are in pretty good condition. But again, we're going to have to redo pretty much everything. So figure that the walls are going to go. Upstairs bedroom across the front. It's a nice bedroom. Floors are nasty. You're going to need, certainly at the very least, carpeting. So where is the sweet spot in this deal? Well, let's figure the after repaired value at $125,000, 100%. Your project costs be $35,000 to fix, could be $40,000. You have soft costs. Now, what are soft costs? Well, that's your interest expense, your utilities, your real estate taxes, legal fees, architect if you need one, building permits if you need them, and so forth. So altogether, your project costs, you can afford to pay. Your purchase price here is shown to be $29,000. Well, that you do the math on that, That puts your project costs at about $75,000. And how does that work? Well, if your end value is $125,000, your sweet spot on that project is $75,000 or 60% of that $125,000. Why is it viable? Why is it a sweet spot? Well, if you keep the property as an investment, the bump in your financial statement is going to be a handsome $50,000. If, on the other hand, you decide to sell it, generally speaking, that decision, you'll want it sold as soon as possible. You're not going to hold out 6 months for highest and best price. It's not unusual to figure you'll discount it up to 20% for a quick sale, and that will give you a profit after having covered all of your expenses of $25,000. Not exactly a waste of your time. But if that's the case, what happens then to Plan B? If it's the season's wrong, it's hard to sell it. Well, we talked about keeping the property as a rental, and in that neighborhood, a house of that size, very conservatively, it's still a smaller home. It's only going to have 3 bedrooms, and this house in particular, one of those bedrooms is about the size for a nursery, really. So figure $1,200 a month rent. Your operating costs are going to be maintenance, utilities, insurance, about $200 a month. Real estate taxes, figure $185. Management in the Chicago area costs anywhere from 8 to 10% or $120 a month. And reserves, which every landlord should be keeping, would be figure at $150 a month. That's for vacancies, for emergency repairs, anything of that sort. So consider then your total expenses, including reserves and management, at $655. So your $655 subtracted from your $1,200 a month in rent gives you a net operating income of $545, out of which you could pay a mortgage, and we put that mortgage in there at $70,000 for 30 years at 6.25%. You're not going to get nice low FHA rates on an investment property, but your spendable income after paying that mortgage at $430 a month, and of course your share of the taxes and everything else, it would be about a little over $100 a month. But don't forget, you're also putting away $150 in addition to that in a reserve account, and you have professional management. If you were to manage the place yourself, of course, you would add that to your income, but you're working for that. You're managing the property. So let's take a second example. This one's on South Sangamon, also in Chicago. It's a 4-bedroom, 2-bath frame house with a garage in back. But on the other hand, this house really, the siding's in good shape, roof is in good shape. Basically, the house needs cosmetic improvements. Now, what does that mean? Well, that means certainly redecorating top to bottom. All the mechanicals, the furnaces need to be cleaned and the filters changed and everything tuned up. Your wooden floors buffed and micro-coated. And by micro-coated, that would be a thin coat of polyurethane. So here's some pictures of what the house looks like. A little bit tired inside, but certainly usable. It's got a outsized furnace, hot water heaters there. There's a 3/4 bath on the first floor, but they lined it with marble tile, certainly reusable. In the kitchen, cabinets would be tossed, appliances would be tossed, and everything would be replaced. So fairly typical for projects of this type, but certainly falls within the category of cosmetic improvements. So how does that? What's the sweet spot in that deal? Well, the house is offered on the market at $62,500. We figure that at the after repaired value, it's on a lot and a half. Wrought iron fence across the front. It's got a 2-car garage in back. Figure after repaired value of $145,000. At our minimal budget for fixing it up, that's we figured 10 to 15,000. Let's say 15,000. Soft costs, we've explained that. It's shown down below: interest, architect, permits, insurance, and so forth. So your overall project cost then would be $93,950. Not done for nothing, of course. But is there a sweet spot in this project? Well, 93,950 taken into the after repaired value of 145 means your costs are about 64%. Thumbs up. That project's a go. So if the project is kept as an investment, you're looking at a gross profit of $51,000 more or less. If, on the other hand, you decide to sell it, and that quick sale discount of 20%, plus or minus, you would still, before tax, for your effort on this project, net perhaps just something over $20,000. Here we see $21,050. So then we haven't talked about a plan B. Where's the plan B? Well, that plan B, of course, is as a rental. This is a larger home. It's got 4 bedrooms, and so we're figuring the rent at $1,450 a month. And in Chicago, we use what Section 8 is paying as kind of a baseline for budgeting our projected anticipated rents. So here we've got maintenance, utilities, and insurance. By utilities, the tenants are paying their own heat and electric. But in Chicago, just water and sewer taxes can be almost as much as real estate taxes. So on a monthly basis, then we're looking at maintenance, utilities, insurance about $250 a month, real estate taxes $150. Once again, the management fee and the all-important reserves. So that means you may not be out of pocket each month because of maintenance reserves are going into a special account, of course, and taxes may be sent monthly to your mortgagee, or you may be setting it aside yourself. But in any event, total expenses should be figured at about $720 a month, leaving then net operating income of $730. Your mortgage, we talked about it here, at $95,000, 30 years, 6.25%, is going to cost about $585 a month. And but there you have. Even the lender is validating the new value of the property at $145, which means that you are not only earning the $145 a month spendable income at $95,000. You've pulled all your cash out of the deal. You have no cash left in the deal, and your effective equity is 50%. But there's one more thing I think would be interesting to look at. If you're not particularly excited about being a landlord, and that is to take a look at one of my favorites, which is, we'll call it Plan C. It's a bonus plan. And that would have you essentially skip the landlord thing entirely. Sell the house on contract. There's a lot of chit-chat, and there has been for years, about so-called selling with lease with option and so forth. Well, in another session, we'll talk a bit about that. I think it's simply an awful plan. Certainly does neither the landlord nor the prospective buyer any good, especially when they have available to them a little-used transaction, which has been around forever, and I suspect always will be, and that is to sell on contract. On where you're located, this might be called a contract for deed or articles of agreement. Let's say you've got a tenant who would just love to move into your property with a lease and option to buy. What I suggest is that you and that prospect consider themselves as a prospective buyer rather than tenant. And under the contract for deed protocol, that's exactly what happens. It would be the same qualification process. If you'd have them as a tenant, they might qualify as a buyer, a non-Section 8, of course. You, as the owner, would be receiving the same income, only now it would be as interest, not as rent. No tax consequence there. It's income in either event. You would also have less expenses because, after all, the contract buyer pays everything, including maintenance. Importantly, if you're in the Chicago area or some municipalities across the country, if you're selling under a Articles of Agreement transaction, you would not be subject to landlord-tenant ordinances, and certainly that's not the case in Chicago. You would not be subject to Chicago's landlord-tenant ordinance. if you know anything about the rights that vests in tenants to the landlord's disadvantage, that is an important feature. Interestingly enough, in the event of default, or if that prospective buyer should stop paying their monthly payment to you, determination is much easier in the event of default. You are not their landlord. You may still have an eviction proceeding, but you're not in housing court to accomplish that. Also, very importantly, you are indeed and in fact giving your buyer a real chance to own the property, unlike the almost impossible side to a lease with option agreement. Now, let's see how the numbers compare. Okay, so let's take a look at just how this Plan C or contract sale might work. Here we've put together a simple spreadsheet showing kind of a comparative rundown on the income to be realized one way or another by you as the contract seller with a contract buyer in place paying you monthly primarily interest, principal, and their share of real estate taxes. And you might want to also include the water taxes in the city of Chicago, and in some municipalities can run nearly as much as the real estate taxes. So let's take a look at how this might work. If we put the rent, the contract payments from your contract buyer at virtually the same as they would be paying as rent, and of course that's part of your marketing argument, that it's not going to cost them any more. And in fact, after they take into account the savings due to their newly won tax deductions, they will in fact be paying less than they would be paying were they renting the property. And in fact, absent only the passage of title, they in fact are now considered the effective owner of that property. So let's just run down just how this might work. We're looking at the rental income pegged, and that's just simply market rate locally at $1,450 a month. Ordinarily, you as the landlord would be responsible for at least minimal maintenance on the property, just to make sure the lawn is cared for and the gutters cleaned in the fall and so forth. But in this case, you are relieved of that responsibility and any emergency maintenance requirements because, in fact, you now have an effective owner, contract owner, in place. The real estate taxes, of course, remain the same. On your side, you no longer have management fees to pay, but you will still, during the period of the contract, I think, want to set aside or take into account the same sort of reserve amount that you would ordinarily have as a landlord. In this case, we show $175. But the expenses on your side, including that reserve and so forth, are no longer $690 a month. You're now at $720 a month. So essentially, your income has increased from $730 to $925. The debt service remains the same. Regardless of what you're collecting from your tenant, you have an underlying mortgage of effectively $95,000 that you are amortizing and paying the interest and principal on a month-by-month basis. So in that sense, as a rental, your spendable income, the cash at the end of the month, after reserves, would be simply about $145. If you were to include the reserves, not having spent them, just a set aside, you would be at $320 a month. In the case of the contract sale, you are collecting after all of your expenses and your collections from your contract buyer, who was paying their calculated interest and principal, you will be realizing $241 plus, of course, once again, the reserve account, which I would recommend you keep in place until that contract is entirely paid off. You are at $340 plus $175. So that's about just over $500, a considerable increase over what it would be as a rental. So, not just on the face of it, but in real terms, this is a more attractive situation for you as a landlord for reasons that I stated earlier. You are no longer the landlord, you are a contract seller. And also for your presumptive tenant, who is now a contract buyer, suddenly is out of pocket at the first of the month, the same $1,450, but at the end of the year, he is in a position, he or she is in a position to deduct $1,800 in real estate taxes at the very least. And of course, it is the nature of the contract you have with that contract buyer that they are paying a portion of their rent. In other words, the $1,450 minus the real estate tax escrow, or $1,300, is being applied to their debt obligation to you, much like a mortgage. In this case, it's effectively a mortgage that you are taking back as the seller. But they are paying $1,300 a month, buying the larger portion of which, same as for you on your note, will be interest expense and therefore tax deductible. So here, this transaction is not only conveys pride of ownership, passes the responsibility to the tenant, but also gives the tenant the tax benefits, income tax benefits of property ownership. On your side, you are no longer collecting rent, but you are collecting interest and principal on the note obligation that is inherent in the contract sale. And that, of course, is a deductible expense to you, and if the tax allowance is passed through for you to pay, of course, that would be a tax deduction for you as well. So in that sense, this is truly a double dip benefit as far as income tax obligations for both you and your contract buyer. You both have substantial, it is effectively double dipping. You are both getting the benefit of the tax deductions allowed today for interest, principal, and real estate taxes. So a couple of other interesting points that should be brought into play here is that under these terms, understand that first of all, there is no appraisal. You as the seller are going to set the price. And that price is going to be determined primarily based on the cost per month, not the end sale price. Most individuals figure how much they can afford to buy as a home or rent based on the cost per month. And of course, the affordable housing kind of measure that is used both by lenders and by financial advisors is approximately 30 to 35% of household income. So in that sense, the price, it will be determined by rental value per month, adjusted for taxes, insurance, and not nominal reserves. I have always simply taken a look at the monthly income as rental, and then calculated essentially after backing out for taxes and insurance. I would simply essentially do the math in reverse to determine at today's interest rates how much mortgage could be funded by those available dollars. Now, in the event you read the market wrong and come the passage of 18 or 24 months or however long that contract is determined by agreement between you and the buyer to run, if they will, of course, their lender will require an appraisal. And if, in fact, at that time it appraises for less than you agreed on, I have always included in the document, in the primary document, that the final transaction would be either at the stated amount, whatever I might choose to make it, in this case perhaps $150,000, or appraised value. And generally speaking, I have invested in this property so advantageously that at that stage of the game, I'm no longer price sensitive. And if it, in fact, should the appraisal come in at 135, well, that's okay. You can't sell it for more than the property is certainly worth. So there are many benefits to this that inure both to the seller and buyer, and hopefully they are illustrated by this spreadsheet. It's a great deal for everybody concerned, and obviously far better than the lease with option, which was proposed initially. What then is this sweet spot all about? Well, it's really where risk and opportunity are in balance. In other words, you know the market so well, you are buying advantageously, and you always have the option of renting. So risk and opportunity are in balance. Value is found because in many cases we are buying distressed homes that need our work to bring them up to standard, so we get a very good price. Skills and resources are in place and ready. That's a condition of enjoying the benefits of a sweet spot. Viable alternatives are available if needed, Plan B, Plan C. Benefits are obvious to all stakeholders on every side. Certainly a demonstration that you can do well by doing good. This is essentially a social enterprise model. What is social enterprise? Social enterprise is where private sector initiatives result in socially beneficial outcomes. Call it a win-win scenario for all concerned. By staying within your sweet spot, it's like growing your own money. Thank you.